Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beyond Grad Show. I know that a lot of people are waiting for this episode, and they will be trickling in as we go along. But I'm super excited to have this chat with Shraddha. Shraddha and I met on LinkedIn, like a lot of other people that I've had on this show. But what she has unique in her experience is that she's gone from finance field, MS in finance, and she's been worked at a banking company, and then found her way into the tech world with AWS. So we are going to dig into all of that. Shraddha, it is awesome to have you on the show. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about you briefly and give us an introduction.
Absolutely. Thanks, Varun. And it's wonderful to be here. I'm so glad I get to share. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm Shraddha. I come from the UAE. I was born and raised there. And then I moved to Seattle about 9 years ago for my master's. And I've been here since. This is home now. And from a professional background perspective, like Varun, you mentioned, been in finance pretty much my entire life. I actually did make the switch from accounting to finance, but pretty much been in that field for the most part. And currently, I'm working as a finance manager at AWS.
Very cool. When you say UAE, my wife was brought up in Dubai. My dad stayed in Karama for a while.
Oh yeah.
Whereabouts in the UAE are you from?
So all over, I think. So like Dubai only, but we've stayed in like Dera, we've stayed in Karama, we've stayed in Jaflia, which is like the start of Sheikh Zayed Road. Yeah, so all over. I think Jaflia was like the last place before I moved. Yeah.
Very cool. I don't know if this is the part of the show that just the two of us enjoy, maybe. I've been to Dubai 6 times now because
Oh,
of
I
having
love it.
dated my wife and then getting married and my dad being there. So definitely love the city.
Yeah,
By
so
the
whenever
way,
people ask me like, "Oh, how do you feel about Dubai?" I'm like, I can't share my opinion. I'm biased. Like, I will always say it's amazing, right? So,
so I have to ask you this. By the way, anybody who's watching us live, feel free to add in your questions while we are chatting. A lot of times I bring them in if they're directly applicable to what we are speaking at that time. If not, I will always make sure that we get an answer from Shraddha by the end of the call. So feel free to add the questions. This is exactly why I wanted to do live. I'll digress a little bit on the Dubai topic and we'll get to where we want to go. But yeah, where did you go to university when you came to the US?
there's from Seattle University. Yeah,
Okay,
so
so
I'm a
you came
proud Red
into a
Hawk.
city.
Yeah,
You came into a city.
yeah.
Now imagine this. I mean, you've seen the US enough, where the Midwest. I went to school in Dearborn, University of Michigan. Dearborn, it's an automotive kind of industry, and it was Michigan. And I brought my wife from Dubai, which is full of skyscrapers, to a place where she couldn't see like a building for a mile or two. So it was such a funny experience that she thought she's going to the US, but she was like, in Hindi, I mean, in Gujarati, she was like, "Man, I've come to a village or something like that." Very cool. Not a lot of people in finance come to the US as compared to people in engineering, people in computer science, core engineering, data, etc. What made you interested in coming to the US? I want to start there just because you have a very non-traditional background.
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, I think the decision to come to the US was like twofold. First, I was very clear that I wanted to pursue my master's in finance. And at that point, I think like there was no better place than US to honestly like come and study. I think the second reason was also like I have my sister who's in the US and she had just had her baby. So my nephew was just born and I wanted to just honestly be closer to him. So that's also like a selfish reason why I was like, know what, like I want to move to the US. So yeah. Yeah.
That is a great reason to be in this part of the world. What is the general path a lot of finance professionals take when they come to the US for the masters? Like, what are the opportunities available? Again, trying to dig into this world because I'm not too familiar with it. I don't know a lot of people are, honestly.
Absolutely. So I think, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities, right? So you come, you join, like, you do your master's program. Again, there's plenty of internship opportunities. But even in finance itself, I think you can pursue, like, you can go the portfolio management, investment banking route. You can pursue like corporate finance, or you can kind of pivot to like what I did, which is FP&A. You can even switch into like accounting, because mostly I think for finance, like, most folks also have like a reasonable knowledge about accounting, if not in depth. So I think there's a lot of like career options. And then yeah, and honestly, I think based on the folks I've spoken to as well, I think there's plenty of options in Seattle, to be honest, in terms of pursuing these finance opportunities, both entry level as well as like, up leveling as well.
Is a CPA required to kind of work in the US as a finance professional?
No, I wouldn't say it's required. Neither is the CFA, to be honest. Like, I think these are the two most hyped, certifications, but or credentials. But I don't think they're required. I think they give you an edge, over and above like most of the other folks, because I think the program in itself takes a lot of discipline and grit to kind of get through. So, automatically, I think anyone who completes even a paper in CFA or a paper in CFA automatically kind of becomes a niche above the others, because, at least they have those like soft skills. But I also think, like, from when you're sitting in an interview, like, if there's a candidate who has a CPA and a candidate who doesn't have a CPA, I don't think there's going to be a preference between the two, in the sense of like, oh, this person doesn't have a CPA, so I'm not going to interview them. Like, I don't think that's the case. But I definitely do think there's a lot of knowledge that comes with these certifications. So, and I personally feel if you are moving towards the portfolio management side, the CFA makes more sense. And if you're moving towards like you're doing something like FP&A, like I am, I would say the CPA would make more sense, because there's a lot of focus on like financial reporting and things we kind of do on a day-to-day basis.
Is that something you've pursued personally?
So it's actually something that's on my radar to pursue. I've just been sitting on it
Okay.
for a while, trying to convince myself. But I've professionally done like an ACCA. I've done the ACCA program, which is the equivalent of like the in like it's basically like the Indian CA, sort of
Mm.
less rigorous, I would say, because I know the Indian CA is extremely like rigorous. But yeah, I've done the ACCA, which is like the UK CA, and so I'm a certified chartered accountant or chartered certified accountant. But the CPA was actually something on my radar that I did want to pursue when I came to Seattle. And that's also actually why I did like an extra tax credit as well, because you have to be eligible for these exams to actually sit them, and you need, n number of credits and stuff, right? So, yeah, it's still very much on my radar. I think I need to just kind of rip the band aid and just go for it. But yeah.
Very cool. I think when you say that you have to convince yourself to do it, it would be because it's not a clear-cut yes or no, like some of the other certifications. So you are weighing the pros and cons there.
No, to be honest, I don't think it's about the. I mean, I definitely want to pursue it, and if anyone asks me
Okay.
whether they should do it, if you ask me, oh, is it absolutely necessary? No. But if you ask me, is it a good certification to pursue? I would say absolutely yes. It's extremely credible. You learn a lot. There's a lot of content, and also for someone who's breaking into the field, I think it gives you that very nice, clean foundation to start off with. Mine is just more of like I'm trying to pave out time to actually do it. I think I have a
Mm.
little bit of a commitment starting issue. So
Mm.
mine is more of that. Yeah.
Awesome. I do see some people are already here watching live. So if you have any question, feel free to add it as a comment in the platform that you're joining us from. So if it's LinkedIn, then add a comment there. If it's YouTube, add a comment there. I will see it and I will definitely bring up that question. I think this is a good time to segue into, your career path from a traditional organization to like the tech world. Let's first start on the traditional side. One thing I noticed was that in the first place that you worked at, it was maybe a smaller company and your client was CBRE and Microsoft, like you mentioned on LinkedIn. Then you went to CBRE, where your client was Microsoft all throughout. Was that luck? Was it a conscious kind of, I want to raise my hand and work on a tech company? Or was it that you were in Seattle, that is one of the biggest organizations in that part of the world, and that eventually became a partner for you guys?
I think it's definitely a combination of the two. I think it's a little bit of luck and it's a little bit of like also kind of long term thinking. So luck, because I was a month into like job hunting right after graduation, and I actually got approached by like a consultancy firm, which is a pretty big consultancy firm over here called Insight Global. They came to me and they were basically like, "Hey, we have this client CBRE. They are looking, so on and so forth." And so it was a relatively lesser struggle in terms of landing kind of my first gig. And again, my intent was to just get my foot in the door. Dream companies can wait. Let's just get our foot in the door and move, right? So I definitely think there's a little bit of luck element there, but I do have to say the conversion from like uh, inside global to CBRE, like coming in as a temp and then becoming permanent, I think that is definitely a little bit of luck, but I also think is a lot of hard work, to be honest. I really have to say, I think I gave it my 100%. And plus I was so excited because after like my masters, I'm back in like into like working in a professional environment, and the culture is so different over here than like how it is in Dubai. So it was honestly like an experience. Plus I had an amazing like bunch of team members who I got to learn a lot from as well. So yeah, I would say it's a combination of the two, to be honest.
Was it like a consulting company where you were actually sitting on the client side day in, day out? And okay, so that kind
That's
of
right.
gave you
Yeah.
an inroads towards that particular organization where you stayed on for like, I think, 4 more years, if I'm not mistaken, 4 or 5.
Almost 6 years actually. Yeah, almost 6 years before I made the jump.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So let's talk about that. You talked about the culture between UAE and the US, but let's talk about the culture between um, and maybe I'm skipping a few steps ahead. So bear with me. Let's talk about the culture between that organization, a financial institution, versus let's say a big tech. I know I'm making that jump early and I'll come back to how you made that jump, but I'm curious because we talked about work culture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for starters, and I think this would come naturally to anyone who has worked or has been associated with Amazon. Fast, it's extremely fast. Something I really had to get comfortable with when I joined. And I think the other thing is like decision making is instant, right? So it kind of feeds into the fast culture, but it's like here I think like we're not just talking about it, we're actually executing, and literally the execution happens in a day. So it's not like, oh, we'll sit on it for a week and then after a week we'll figure it out. This is more like we've spoken about it, we've gotten sign off, let's do it, right? So that's definitely like a huge change. I think between the two companies, I think collaboration is common, honestly, between the two. I think we've had a very collaborative culture, I think, across the board. The other thing, honestly, I think I would say is the one thing I've noticed here, and I think this might be an Amazon culture thing, but like there's always an unspoken rule that you bias for action. Like you don't need to have 100% of the concepts and the data and everything. Like if you're 80% confident, just go for it, right? Like the bias is more towards actioning than making sure that you're 100% accurate. I think that's definitely something that's like a huge change, and it's also kind of brought a lot of change in me as well, because you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, with knowing that you don't know everything and you're still doing it. So that was a huge like mindset shift, I would say, for me personally.
It reminded me of the LinkedIn journey you and I both share, right? Creating content online and writing online is a bias for action because you have no clue whether it will
Yeah.
work or not, or where do the next 6 months go. So I can see that change in culture. Can you talk about the competitiveness inside the organization? Do you see a difference there?
No, not really. I honestly, like I mentioned, I think it's more of like a collaborative, at least in the org that I work, right? Like I can speak to AWS, but I think it's a very collaborative culture, to be honest. I mean, first of all, like you work with some of like the really bright minds, both in AWS and even in my earlier team, like really smart people, right? So lots to learn from, and people are willing to help. Like that's the best part. Like I remember when I joined, I was brand new to the org itself, like completely new, no Amazon experience at all. So getting used to the culture was a bit of a shocker. But then apart from that, it's like there's so much to learn, and you kind of get thrown into it, and you have to figure it out, right? So the way to do that is you ask a lot of questions, and people are actually willing to help. So it's not like folks are kind of gatekeeping the knowledge, or they don't want to share. And so frankly, like I personally don't think that there's a lot of like a negative like competition or anything like that within, like I haven't experienced that.
Very cool. When you say that you got a shock, I know you talked about the pace of it, like the pace is just crazy. Were there any elements that were equally shocking in addition to the pace?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, and I know people talk about this a lot, imposter syndrome. It's really a thing. I don't think I experienced like the full fledged feeling of it, but honestly, there have been times when I've sat in rooms and I'm just like the realization sinks in on you that oh my god, the people in this room are like 10 times smarter than you are, right? And it may or may not be true, but you're definitely feeling it, right? And so I think just kind of getting used to that and understanding that like you have to up level, like you have to read, you have to ask questions, you have to learn. And so that was definitely like one of the things that took me a while to kind of get used to. I think the other thing was also like people are willing to help, but no one's going to handhold. So from a prior kind of culture of like, oh, I'm going to handhold you and literally train you and everything, and then you can do it. Here, it's more like there may or may not be documentation. There may not be the people. You just kind of jump in, figure it out, and tomorrow you're speaking to it in front of like a bunch of like directors. So that was also like a little bit of a shocker for me to kind of get used to, where there's not a lot of like, oh, we're going to get you there. It's more of like, you get there. You just have to. So, yeah.
Very interesting. I noticed that when I was in a Fortune 500 company in the automotive industry as well, which is when they require a lot of hand-holding, questions start coming up like, okay, did we make a right hire? And why do they need all of this hand-holding? Don't they have the right skills or don't they have the right
Right.
experience? But sometimes it's just maybe you are thrown in the deep end and you don't know swimming yet.
Right.
So if you had to give an advice to somebody coming into AWS or a tech company from a non-traditional background about this proactiveness element, what is one framework or what is one advice you would share with them?
Definitely say like, yeah, I mean, definitely, I would say like be a self starter, like what you mentioned. I think you have to learn to be a self starter. You can start small, right? Like you can probably pick up something that's not going to cause like too much damage if you're worried about like, oh, you're going to create like some big issue or something like that. That's what you're worried about. I would say start small, but definitely like practice being a self starter, right? Before you approach someone, I think one of the most important things is before you go to someone for help, and it's okay to ask for help, but you have to have tried to at least figure it out for yourself. A lot of the times that gap is never filled, right? It's always like, oh, I have a question, I'm going to jump to the first person I see, and that's fine, but it's the problem is like folks are busy and they just may not have the time to support you at that level, right? So it's just more of like try and see if you can figure it out for yourself, and more often than not, honestly, I think you can, because you have everything. It's just a matter of looking for it, right? So I would definitely say like try that, like start to try and figure it out for yourself, and gradually extend the amount like that you kind of self-serve before you actually go to someone.
That is something that I learned from my mentor. And what I call two suggestions, two options, one suggestion. Pardon me. So what you can do is in this uncertainty layer, when you are trying to be proactive, you have to do your own work to figure out two options that you can take. So this is a situation I can do A or I can do B, but then don't stop there. Like, don't present those options to the decision maker or to anybody who's helping you, a mentor within the org, a supervisor. You say, okay, I think I should do or we should do option B, and here are my reasons. So what you are doing here is, one, you are giving people options and making it easy for them to help you. Okay, yeah, go with this, not don't go with that. And then the other, you are exercising judgment. So in the beginning you will be way off, but slowly your judgment will also start to get better between which
Right.
options to select. Sometimes you'll get an option C and you'll be like, no, no, don't do that. Do option C. Sometimes it's easier for people to help that way, and that this is a way that they can be a self-starter. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. I think the part where you were like, oh, like you can exercise your judgment and come up with like the solution as well. I think it's all come up with a recommendation, right? And I think that's something that we are commonly like advised on, and usually that's the like kind of the advice I give to folks as well. Like you come to me, like don't come to me with a problem. Like it's fine, like you need help, right? Don't come to me with a problem. Come to me with a proposal or recommended solutions. I'm not saying that that has to be the final solution, but what that does is gradually, like, as you try and exercise your own judgment, your own, critical thinking, ultimately you get to a point where that actually, you do hit success, right? And it does become kind of the right answer, or it does become the way that folks want to go. More than anything, I think when you're starting off your career as well, I think it's an extremely important skill to kind of showcase to who you're presenting that, like, you have that judgment, and you gradually earn trust because you bring that to the table, right? You're not just sitting over there on the side and you're like, oh, you tell me, I will do. Like that, you can literally get AI to do that. What is it that you are bringing separately, right? It's that critical thinking, I think, is ultimately what you need to develop, and kind of like, I think, what sets folks apart, to be honest.
Yeah, because the bar has raised with AI. Like AI can give
Right.
you solutions, so you cannot. I mean, in a way, it's great, right? You can ask AI a problem that you're facing, and you can get recommended
Yeah.
solutions right away. Of course, you have to exercise your judgment. Of course, you need to have taste. You have to have domain knowledge to kind of take that and go. So, what I say, AI plus HI, so human intelligence is still required.
Great.
But I think that that is a great way to put it. I want to kind of take us back to CBRE for one moment. I know I jumped when it came to the culture. Let me go back a moment. So, from inside, because you were already working at CBRE, that was a great move for you. At CBRE, you worked with Microsoft throughout. Was there ever an option to go to Microsoft just because you had that experience?
Or if I had initiated probably conversations, I may have had opportunities. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, I could always kind of like apply for Microsoft. Like that was always an open avenue, to be honest. Just like everyone else, right? Like anyone can apply to Microsoft, right? But I definitely think like the fact that I have worked with Microsoft finance partners, I think I can kind of speak a little, like translate a little bit more into my like experience, as I go through the process. So I definitely think that could have helped, but frankly, no. I mean, I think I really enjoyed like working with CBRE and kind of being on this side of the client experience. And now I've kind of switched over to the other side, where I'm actually the client, right? And I'm not like kind of supporting the client. So I feel like I have. I think the advantage of being at CBRE for so long also has been like I've kind of gained all the exposure I could on that side of the table, and now it's like it's nice to kind of experience like this side of the table, I guess, is how I see it.
Was that the motivation to go to a tech company where the client side was always a tech company, and that made you motivated to pursue a role on the client side, and that was eventually a tech company? Or was there any other yearning to get into that industry? What were the motivations early on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say this. Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that it was I wanted to be on the other side, just that was for sure a motivation. Plus, I wanted like like I wanted one of the Fang names on my resume. It was a thing. It's always been a thing. I think those two definitely, but I also think like growth, right? I think for me, like I wanted to kind of grow a little bit more. And like I was very interested in the data center space back then as well, but at like when I was working with CBRE, I was not supporting the data center space of Microsoft. I was supporting like the real estate space of Microsoft, right? Which is also very interesting and was great for 6 years. But I was kind of ready to like move on a little bit and kind of expand my horizons. And so that's honestly why I think like moment I had the like I think the recruit I applied for the role, and I think the recruiter reached out to me, and as soon as I saw AWS, like I had not even interviewed, but in my head I was just ecstatic because I was like, this is exactly what I want to do next. Like it aligns perfectly. So yeah.
Very cool. We've already got a couple comments here. From one comment I see here is from Shreyasa. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. They also started their career with CBRE, and they mentioned how there's been an interesting discussion so far. Get a lot of work done with AI, and I agree. AI with HI is the key. Absolutely. Shreyasa and anybody watching, if you have questions for Shraddha, please let me know. I'll bring them in quickly. So going back to the motivation, you said growth was a motivator. You said the halo effect or the brand status of the logo of the fan company was a motivating factor. Now that you have that brand logo behind you, How does that feel from that part of the motivation?
Still feels great, to be honest. Yeah, like now I have the brand piece, and so that's checked on the on on a piece of paper. But I think in terms of like the kind of work that we do here, like at AWS, and just given I've mentioned this, like given how fast things move, every day there's something new, and every day we're expanding and growing, right? So there's no better place to kind of be at this exact time, right? And so it's extremely interesting, and I kind of really enjoy also. I think like the space that I'm in. So I'm work in FP&A, I work in central FP&A within AWS. And so we work with a lot of like upstream, downstream partners in the data center, specifically in the data center space, right? So lots to learn, a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of think outside the box opportunities. Like I felt like because I worked in FP&A even when I came from CBRE, I always felt that like I know like I already know stuff, right? So I'm coming here with that experience. But I think after coming here, I realized that there's just so much more that I don't know. And it's all has to just do with the fact that the space is completely different. So the context, the conversations, the metrics, they're completely different, right? And the way you perceive them are completely different. So I mean, I used to always be under the belief that like every finance role is the same. True. What you do might be the same, but the context is so important and it can really change how you do your job, honestly. So I think
Can you
that's
give us
also
an
like a huge thing
example?
to see. Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things is like leases, for example, right? Is just general like building leases. Something I used to work with at CBRE. I kind of was sort of I think my own team's like subject matter expert to some extent. Coming here, like it took me almost 5 months to understand the model that builds like our lease reporting, right? 5 months, and this is someone who considered herself as a subject matter expert. So and it's not just leases, right? Like I also work a lot with like operating expenses, which has primarily been what I've been working on since the past, since I started working pretty much, right? Completely feels like I don't like you feel like a blank board basically that you're starting afresh because the context is so different. But the advantage is even though the context is different because you have that base already built in terms of like how you want to like get work done basically, it becomes easier. It's really just applying the context in a different situation. But again, it can be very like overwhelming when you start, but gradually you kind of get used to it, right? So I would say like if from here I was to move to like say a completely different team like Prime Video, for example, right, or devices or something like that, again it would be like a whole new world. So I feel like within Amazon it's like there is all of these different worlds and each world is like just so different from each other. So yeah,
Each world is in different industry, so you feel like you are making
really,
huge pivots, even if it's
surely,
within the
surely.
same company. Were there any barriers or fears that you put in front of yourself when making this move from the consulting side to the client side, or from a more traditional organization to like a tech organization? Were there any fears that made you hesitate before applying to these roles?
Definitely. I mean, I think, after working, so first of all, I think because you like after working for almost 6 years at CBRE and then suddenly wanting to step out and be like, oh, now I need to look for a new job. First of all, the job market is very different than what it was when I saw it like 9 years ago, right? So already I'm like, okay, what is happening? So that itself is a shocker right there. And then getting back into the whole process of like, oh, let's apply, let's do this. Plus, I think like 9 years ago when I was applying for roles, I was kind of doing maybe what a lot of people do, but basically blind applying, right? So you apply left, mass applying, you apply left, right, and center, you check a box saying, oh, I did 25 applications, like great, doesn't get you anywhere anymore. Like it has to be more intentional, right? So that was like a huge gap that I had to fill. But I think the part that I was very concerned about or worried about, I think while I was doing it, or like the fear of rejection, because you already feel like you're an established professional, and so when someone comes and tells you no, it's like it chips away on your confidence a little bit. I would say that. But I think the other thing also would be like you go into these interviews, you're trying to like kind of repurpose your experience to cater to big tech, but you go into these interviews and then you come back with rejections and you don't get any feedback. So you don't know if what you're doing is right or wrong, right? So do you continue doing it? Do you not? What do you do? So I think these were kind of all of my like I wouldn't say pain points, but like concerns, I guess, while I was going on this path. Definitely.
Very interesting. I think you picked out a nuance there that is underrated and not talked about a lot, which is once you become an established professional, for you to be judged in this way, for you to be rejected, for you to feel like you questioning your identity, that is not a comfortable space to be in. So anytime you're making especially a big jump like that, you are going to question yourself. While you were questioning yourself, how did you maintain consistency? We'll get into the nitty gritty of the job search, but the consistency of applying, the consistency of showing up is an emotional toll in the job search process right now. And then if you add the pivot to it in terms of industries, that's an even added layer to it. Talk to us about emotional consistency and consistency in action taking.
Absolutely. So I think, yeah, like I think every time there was a rejection, it was you kind of go into a little corner and then you're kind of there, right? But I've always told people this, and I think this is something I've learned over the course of the years as well. Probably something that comes with a little bit of maturity, maybe. But you like it's fine if you're feeling bad about something and you cry about it, and that's okay. It's also it's more what's more important is how fast do you recover from that, right? Are you going to spend the next 1 year just crying about the fact that you had one rejection, or you're going to cry about it for a bit and then move on and just do your thing, right? So I think over the years I've kind of gradually got into that point. So I would always like the way this would work is interview happens and then I will get the response and it's a no or whatever. That whole day is wasted because I will just whine, and usually the person I whine to is my partner, and he will tell you that this is like I don't want to deal with this. But I would just whine with him, whine to him, cry about everything, just question my entire existence, of course. And then the next day morning, I would just I'd sleep on it. Next day morning, I wake up and I'm like, okay, it is what it is. Let's just move on. Like, rip the band-aid. Let's do this again. So gradually, I think what that also helps happen is like you get a thicker skin as well, I think. And so I think by the time, like, before the AWS thing happened, like I think by then I was already kind of semi immune to like, okay, it's gonna be a rejection, like whatever, like it's fine. What are you gonna do, right? You just have to pick it up and move on. So that's honestly how I kind of dealt with the emotional kind of aspect of it. I would definitely recommend, like, when people, like, if people go through this, which I'm sure a lot of folks do, but if you go through this, I think lean on your support system. I will say that is, even if they don't want you to lean on them, you should lean on them. So I would say like that is underrated, honestly, because you can always just be like, oh, I'm going to manage this and I'm going to do it by myself, but it's in the whole job application process itself, it's already relentless. Make it easier by having a support system. It could be your partner, it could be your family, your friends, your roommate, anyone, right? But just make sure you have that one person in your corner who can kind of help pick you up, because I think it really makes a difference.
I have seen time and again with my one on one work with top professionals from the top companies, where at some point the issue is not strategy, the issue is the emotion and the way you handle emotion. So I'm glad that you are sharing some strategies here. And yes, your partner can get irritated or can can be burdened by you leaning on them, but so be it. I mean, these are the situations where you work together. And a lot of times, like there was a mentee of mine who had not told their parents that they were job searching again. And I was like, dude, are you really sure that you want to do that? Because this is already a very tough situation. I know you feel like you will be putting a burden on them and making them be worried, but they are your biggest strength. Even
Right.
if they will be worried, they will still be your biggest strength. So I'm glad that you said what you said.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I resonate with that because I think we have this thing now in Indian culture, which is like nazar, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
it's a thing. We believe in that, right? Like whatever evil eye or whatever it is. So we are basically like, so I used to do that, right? Like I would have these interviews and I'd be like, oh, I'm not telling anyone till I actually crack it, because then like it's also an accountability thing, right? Like moment you tell someone, it becomes a thing, right? So if you're not
Hmm.
telling people, it's not a thing. Like you're just doing it, and if it happens, that's fine. If it doesn't, whatever. So I used to kind of do that before, and then I realized that like, who is this serving? This is not benefiting anyone. Like I have to bear the toll of the rejection and I have to get over it myself because no one else knows. And like that's not the way this should work, right? So I very much like resonate with that. I think you should definitely, like, if you are going out and trying something new, anything new, you're trying to do something, like definitely let like the folks in your corner know, like you'll have a support system, like let them know at least, so that like if things don't work out the way you want it to, like you always have that them to like fall back on.
I'm smiling slightly because another strategy, and I say this completely jokingly, can be to wear all the evil eye jewelry that you have, do the whole put the kapda on your head and do that, whatever you have to do to make sure. But I say that jokingly. But I think the emotional aspect is important, and I'm glad we covered that. Let's dig into the marketing material angle. Like, now, these tech companies are a lot more competitive. They look at things a little bit differently. Did you do anything different with your marketing materials, or do you think FANG companies look at marketing materials differently? If so, how? Marketing material, as in resume, LinkedIn. So, do they look at it differently, and if so, how?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think like, yeah, I definitely think, yeah, because what it would be is like, so you have your like resume, right? And usually and this is a mistake I've made in the past as well. Usually what I used to do is I used to put like responsibilities. So I managed a team, I did this, I managed the month and close process, for example, right? That honestly does not tell anyone, this person sitting in front of me, anything. Like, it just means that I've done something, and maybe so have 50 other people sitting in the same room, right? One of the changes that I personally made, which actually benefited me, was like transitioning from like just stating responsibilities to stating impact, right? And really quantifying impact. I think I would say like most companies definitely want you to do, like, that's the intent of the resume, they want you to quantify your impact. But I think tech companies a little bit more, and frankly I think they have a little bit of a lesser tolerance, I think, to like non-impact quantified resumes, right? Because for them, like, literally, I think I was talking to a recruiter like a month ago. They literally get 10 to 15 seconds at the most to look at a resume. So if you think about it, you have 10 to 15 seconds to impress someone, to be able to then move to kind of that first round of an interview, right? So wouldn't you want to kind of get those key things like hit their eye immediately, right? So I definitely think like your resume, your LinkedIn, like these should all kind of reflect. I think your LinkedIn should not be a photocopy of your resume. I've seen this a lot. I've done this also. That's why I'm bringing it up. I've made the same mistake, but it should not be a photocopy of your resume. And then the second thing is, I think from a LinkedIn perspective, it should really be like someone coming into your LinkedIn should understand what your story is in less than 30 seconds. Like, they should not have to spend, 5 minutes, and no one would, but they should not have to spend 5 minutes to figure out like what your high level story is, right? So I would say these are kind of the two, like maybe 2 to 3 things I would say, like, think about when you're rebranding for like big tech.
Man, these are topics I've spent hours talking about and sharing. But I want to hear your perspective, which is when you were thinking about quantifying your impact, which is so critical, what were some insights you got as to how to do that?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I also have a friend who I know you know as well, Shreya Mehta. So I obviously follow her for obvious reasons. But basically, I think she shared some really wonderful insights on like how do you get your resume from being just a bunch of responsibilities to kind of quantifying your impact. So just following along some of the frameworks that she has shared, or other like coaches I know have shared, basically. But I also think like taking a step back, right? Like, so when you think about your responsibilities, like, I know what I've done, right? I've say managed month and close, but within that, like, then you break it down into smaller steps, right? Okay, what was the month and close process? There was this, I coordinated with stakeholders, I built this model, I sent out these files, I whatever, these are the 3 things, let's just assume, right? But within those, like, when you double click a little bit more, you can kind of think of like, oh, when I built this model, it actually saved like 20 minutes of time. There you go, that's my impact, right? So I really think like when you approach, like, it's fine to start with your responsibilities, but make sure that your responsibilities can drill down into what the impact is you've created. There's a lot of things like when we work in an organization, there's a lot of like things that you do that could immediately create impact, right? So you don't even need to give it a second thought. But there are some things where it's like hidden impact. That's what I like to call it. You do a lot of things, you don't even realize the kind of value add or the kind of impact you're creating because you've done the job and you've moved on, right? So I think when you sit down and redo your resume, that's when you can kind of double click and really think about like, oh, this was the impact I created, and then translate that into your resume.
Yeah, going deeper, right? One of the strategies that I share is the Toyota 5Y. Like when something breaks down on a car assembly line,
Right.
Toyota had this principle where they would ask, okay, why did this part break down? And let's say they broke down because it was not designed properly. So then why
Right.
was it not designed properly? They would go five
Go
layers
all.
deep to
Yeah.
get to the root cause. I think the inverse can happen where you can go 5 layer deep in terms of asking for the why, and then you will get the impact of the work that you are doing. You might not need to share the fifth one
Yeah.
where, okay, the company bottom line increases. Like
Right.
everything cannot have like that direct of an impact, but somewhere within that exercise, you'll find a impact to what you are doing. So I'm glad that you are pushing people to kind of go beyond that responsibility to the impact point. I think that is excellent. LinkedIn is another story. What I do want to focus on is the interview. I know interviewing is a lot different when it comes to traditional industries versus tech industries. Talk to us about how many rounds your interview was at AWS, and then we'll go into like how you think people should crack one round of after the other. But what kind of rounds did you have and how many of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my first round was just a call, I think, with the hiring manager. So that was very like straightforward, just an hour's call with the hiring manager. And again, all of the interviews I would say like at AWS, at least the ones I had, were all behavioral. So you basically have your leadership principles from Amazon. You're tested on those. You have a couple of different, questions that are asked, and then you respond, and then that happens for about 45 minutes of the hour, and then the last 15 minutes is usually like you have an opportunity to ask the interviewer questions, right? So that's your first round. The second round, if you make it past that, the second round would then be your loop, which is the famous loop, which is like the 5 hour long interview. Again, you have the option of taking it on all on one day, or you can split it between 2 days, depending on what you prefer and your time convenience. And again, the format is the same, right? So you have 1 5 hour interviews, or no, 5 1 hour interviews with like, could be like five interviewers, or sometimes a couple extra people who are like maybe shadowing, would sit in on the call and just listen in. And again, the concept is like 45 minutes of behavioral interviews each, and then like you have 15 minutes to kind of ask your questions. Once all of that is done, they usually get back to you, like that's it, that's the final, like after the five are done, you're done with interviewing. And then after that, they usually get back within 3 to 5 business days, I think, usually. And like for me, they got back like really fast. I think I got a response in like less than 3 days, actually. It was very quick. So
Very
yeah.
nice. Which is surprising that all, I mean, maybe not surprising that all of the rounds that you had were all
Yeah.
leadership principle based. When what I have noticed is with my mentees is if you have a technical skill like
Mhm.
coding skill or something else, then there are technical rounds as well,
Yeah.
like system design and stuff like that.
Right.
But it is good to know that in, let's say, something that is not coding related, then everything is behavioral. And it is so crazy the amount of importance that behavioral interviews are given. And I know we were joking briefly before this call as well. Talk to us about why behavioral interviews at Amazon are different than any other company out there.
I would definitely say, because I think Amazon is big about their leadership principles, right? And I think personally, as an applicant, like I remember when I was prepping on for the Amazon interviews or whatever, and going through the leadership principles, I was so stressed out, because I was like, man, these are just a bunch of leadership principles. Like I can't believe I'm getting rejections. Like I've obviously interviewed with Amazon before and had multiple rejections. So like I can't believe I'm getting rejections on like stories that I'm crafting for these principles. Like why are these so important? Now that I'm here, I actually understand why they're important, because I think in the first week of being in this role, they may have mentioned like 5 principles at minimum, like within a week. Like literally, I think there's no day that goes by without anyone quoting a leadership principle. And people don't just like talk about it, they actually embody it, right? Literally over here. So now that I'm on this side of the table, I can actually understand like why these are so important and why we actually want to, you know, test candidates based on these leadership principles, right? And I think the one thing I will say, I think the reason it's a little bit more challenging is A, there's a lot of leadership principles, but I think also B, it's like the each answer needs to kind of cater to the leadership principle, but then also show your technical skills to some extent, right? So even though we don't have like a technical interview, your behavioral answer is basically like talking about maybe like a model that you built, and you get like triple clicked on like the level of details, right? So you need to have a solid technical like understanding of what you built as well, and at the same time you need to embody like, you know, that interest to like bias to action and learn and be curious and like all of the different principles. So I think the combination of the two honestly is what makes it more challenging. Your story cannot just be like, oh, you're like, I'm a you know, team player and I like collaboration and that's it. Like it can, you can't have a financially weak story but like a leadership principle strong story. It has to be a balance of the two, and I think that's kind of what probably makes it a little bit more challenging, I think, maybe.
That is so cool you say that. I want to double down on that, which is yes, you can have a leadership heavy story, like a leadership principle heavy story, but if it is not accompanied by strong technical skills, strong technical processes, frameworks, then it's going to go for a toss. It's going to just sound very mushy and high level, which is why I had to create like a framework in my program called bone, muscle, and skin, where the muscle is the story, right? Okay, this happened, like the star story. This was a situation, this was a task, this was action, but it has to have bones. And the bones are the exact project you did, the frameworks you use, the impact the project created. It has to have in there. Otherwise, the muscle is just flapping in the air. You need something to structure it. You mentioned something also which I want to highlight is the triple click, right? One of the coolest things that I find in the whole Amazon interview is that they are ruthless at follow-up questions. Talk to me about your experience with that. Like how, like I just share a little bit more about that follow-up question part when it comes to Amazon.
Definitely. I think the one thing we pride ourselves is in like, even if the candidate doesn't give us like all of the details, we'll make sure that we figure out how to find it, right? Even if it takes like 5 to 6 like clicks, we will get in and we will get that detail, right? So the challenge there, the one thing I will say is the challenge there is like, it sounds really cool, but like it's so stressful to prep for it, because so you have the high level questions, right? Like, okay, this is the leadership principle, these are the associated examples, whatever, right, that you can come up with. What you can't anticipate is what is the recruiter going to follow up back on. Like you can kind of gauge some of the questions, but sometimes you can ask questions which you're like, where did this come from? Like I have no idea like where this is coming from, right? And again, the idea is like you can step back and take a minute to kind of, you know, reassess yourself, but like you ultimately have to give like a star format, you know, answer which still ties into what you already said. So it's very like, it's very stressful, to be honest. But I think for me, it was one of the interviews. I think I had like, this wasn't a double click. I think for me it was more of like, I haven't gotten a lot of double clicks. I've gotten like 2 double clicks most at the most, usually, because if I'm a talker, so I usually give the information first. But I think one of the things I did experience in one of my interviews was like, you usually go with a preset prepped, you know, bunch of examples, right? 20, 18. I think the sweet spot is honestly 18 to 20. And per leadership principle, you usually have like three. If you can keep three per leadership principle, I think that's a sweet spot, so that you don't have to repeat, right? Because again, multiple interviewers can test you on the same principle. So for me, one of the challenges was, I think in one of the interviews, this was in the loop, I got asked like 6 questions back to back in one interview. Like literally, like it was like question, answer, like we one entire hour, 6 questions. And I was like, that's 6 of my examples. And I still had like 2 interviews left. So I was like, oh my God, like now what do I do? Like I don't want to repeat answers because you know you ideally don't want to do that. So that was like a really stressful moment. But I think in terms of the double click, I would say like the hack would be pay real close attention to what the interviewer is asking you. I mean, this is obviously by default anyway, but even when you go to double click, and I would say moment the interviewer is going into like past the second double click, kind of gauge that there's something that you're not giving them, and so just be a little bit more intentional when you're answering the third one.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. I think it is easy to assume that people are listening to the question.
Mm.
But I've done 200 mock sessions. Let's say it's, I mean, yeah, any, the number does not matter. Let's say I've done multiple mock sessions. You'll be surprised how many times I intentionally ask a two-part question where one person answers the first part and just completely forgets the second part. Or I ask a question and then they are making up the answer on the spot. So then the answer is just something different than what it
Yeah.
is asked. So it is a small thing, but it is actually significant, which is listen to what the question is and then you want to share your best story there. By the way, we have a question regarding just careers in general from Shreyasta. So I'll take that close to the end because we are knee deep in the interviewing part of it. But the continuing on the interviewing part, my final question there is that you mentioned 18 to 20 stories. How do you come up with 18 to 20 stories?
Honestly, I think that was like the most stressful part of the interviewing. Like, I don't even think it's sitting in front of the interviewer and talking, or telling your story. I really think it's coming up with those examples. Like, you have to literally, like, I think the way I did it, take your resume, you have responsibilities, impact, whatever, like whichever shape or form, and literally start with your experiences and go through, like, okay, like, what is it that you do you have a story in this sort of a thing. So you literally have to, like, to your point, like double, triple, quadruple click to kind of get a story from, because the thing is, like, there'll always be things that you've done. And I've mentioned this before, there'll always be things you've done, right? A lot of the time, so this kind of happens like like those things happen subconsciously, or like, they just happen as a part of your day, right? And you don't pay too much attention. It's only when you take a step back and you're doing a process like this is when you're like, you really have to think about what you've done. So for me, this was the hardest part, to be honest, putting the answers together, because I had to backtrack on, okay, when did I do this? And also the other thing is, like, usually they want examples of your most recent experience, right? So that's the other problem, because you may have done something 3 jobs before, but you can't use that, because I mean, you can if you really had to, but like, preferably you don't want to quote that, right? So you have to hit that sweet spot. But I think it took me, I don't know, like probably like a weekend and another 2 days or something like that to literally come up with like some nice 18 examples. And then within that, then of course, then you have to, like, you've written the examples in a haphazard way just to kind of get the story. Then you have to clean it up and frame it and then practice it, obviously, because you don't want it to sound like you're, pitching someone. You want it to sound like you're telling a story. And then, of course, the unanticipated follow ups, right? So, yeah.
There are parts of this process that a tool cannot replicate, AI cannot replicate. And this is one of the big parts is that you have to do the deep work. There is
I
just
agree.
no other way to do it. One thing I remember from a book it is a book on cracking a product management job, but it works really well here, which is like a matrix. So let's say in the X column or on the X column you put all the leadership principles, like all the 12
Okay.
principles, and on the Y column you have uh, all the projects that you worked on. What you can do is for each project see how many just leadership principles you can talk about for that project before you exhaust your mind space and
Yeah.
cognition. And then at least what happens is that for the second one, you can then do the same thing. For the third one, do the same thing. Those are your 3, 4 recent projects. At
Right.
least then you can pick and choose and kind of create an overlap where you can
Right.
get as many stories out of it
Right.
and at least be analytical about it. Because if you tell me, Varun, you need to have 18 stories ready for 12 leadership principles, I'm like, uh, how do I do that? I need some framework. I need some matrix to kind of help me. But not all leadership principles are the same.
Right.
Or at least that is what I have come across with my research and my experience helping other people. Any inside view about whether all leadership principles are the same? Is there something that gets talked about more often at work over the others?
I would say yeah, and I think even with interviewing, I'll bring that up. Like usually, what I tell people, and this is what I personally did as well, and I don't know if it's the right tactic, but in your first call, which is basically like with the hiring manager, usually I think the focus is on like usually the focus you'll have focused on like two or three principles. So I would just say like focus on those. Prep your answers really well for those, right? Let that be kind of the crux of
And
your
which one
focus.
are they, you think?
These are usually I personally think they are like ownership. I think is a big thing because it gets spoken a lot about. Like it's something we talk about every day, and it's something we are expected to do every day, right? So I definitely say ownership. Depending on what role you're applying for, I think deep dive is a definitely a good one to have an example for. Learn and be curious, because we work with a lot of ambiguity, like no, like defined data sets basically for the most part. Sometimes you, like I said, sometimes you don't even have documentation, you may not even have an owner, you may not even have data, like you'll have to go hunt for the data, right? So that's how ambiguous it gets, right? So I definitely think like ownership, deep dive, learn and be curious, I think are the kind of the big ones. Invent and simplify, big big focus. Then what I usually say is I think these four are usually kind of like the primary like focus. They will definitely show up at least in one of the interviews, right? So uh, focus on these, and then what I usually tell say is like if you go into the like the loop, then you can prep an example for like all of the others, but like these four, like make sure you have like really tight stories, because I usually think like these are honestly like personally to me as well, like I think these are some of the four like mostly important leadership principles at Amazon personally.
Very cool. You said this was not the first time you were applying for Amazon. Uh, Talk to us about the whole application in general. Like what ways did you apply? Which way of applying did you find to be more effective at landing interviews? Give us some numbers, give us some landscape of this journey of yours so that people can understand like what it takes to kind of get to where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I will say this. I think I may have interviewed at Amazon, I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 times before I actually landed this Amazon AWS job. Of course, over the period of like multiple years, not like all in one year, but like over the course of multiple years. And I will say before I landed the AWS job, I think the furthest I got in an interview was clearing the. Actually, no, yeah, I don't even think I cleared the first round. Like, I don't think I ever cleared the first round. So that's like the furthest I've gone. This AWS was the first time that I actually went through completely. But yeah, so I definitely think like that. Just for context, like that's how many times I've been like applied and been rejected, and then kind of like still kind of came here. Just for context, and I think the other thing I would say is like application process, right? So generally like previously, like before the AWS role, I think previously the way I used to apply, like again just go onto the Amazon portal, find a job, apply. One of the things that gradually changed as I got the process evolved, and I got more towards the point of like okay, I want to pivot to Amazon completely, I think was I started basically like asking for referrals. Like I think that is very important, and I tell this to a lot of people, like you leverage your network, be shameless about it, like it's okay. At the most, a person's not going to respond, and that's fine, but like at the off chance that someone does actually come back to you, like you literally have an opportunity to like get an interview, right? Which is not something that a lot of folks easily get, right? So definitely like ask for referrals as much as you need to. And then yeah, and I think what really helped, so the referral piece definitely helped, like leveraging network. I think it does give you a little bit of a boost. It can't guarantee you an interview for sure, I would say that, but it definitely gives you a little bit of a boost. I think what really did help is posting on LinkedIn. I think that is one thing, like starting my LinkedIn journey, I think definitely helped, because it got me a lot more visibility and exposure when I had folks reach out to me even via LinkedIn, like recruiters reach out to me via LinkedIn. So that was a really really nice feeling, like apart from applying via the portal, like you actually having like hiring managers or recruiters reaching out to you with job opportunities. It's so I definitely think like LinkedIn posting also got a lot of that visibility for me.
We definitely need to talk about that for a few minutes. I will take up a few comments here. Naman, I know Naman, I mean, I know he's ready said do such a enriching discussion, loving the questions. I actually reached out to Naman. He has interviewed so many people. So I actually reached out to him for advice on asking questions, and I'll highlight it because I think this can help you in interviews as well, which is ask questions that are what he calls the uncanny valley, where the person also has to think through the answer. And it's not something that they've been asked all the time, where they can just regurgitate what they know in their mind automatically. So, definitely a hat tip to him for helping me. There is a comment about Nazar and jewelry, eye jewelry. That is hilarious. That we talked about that. Here's a question that I want to take up before I go into the LinkedIn part for a few minutes or so, which is there a space, is there space to grow in terms of career in real estate and cloud, given that companies are laying off people due to AI? What do you think about that, Shraddha?
Yeah, I definitely still think that there's a lot of growth, to be honest. And we've spoken about AI a little bit earlier, but I think AI is definitely growing. Like I won't sit back and be like, oh, there's no AI. Like we're encouraged to use a lot of AI in our roles as well. But I think the opportunity as a finance professional is basically, or as a professional, I wouldn't say finance, as a professional is basically figuring out how to use AI, and then using it to the like basically using its best competency, right? I think that is a skill in itself. Like anyone can use it, AI, but not everyone can use it and get the best value from it. So I think that's definitely a plus point. The other thing I think we touched about is human intelligence and AI. We will, I think there will always be opportunity to grow because you can apply your critical judgment, and thinking, which I think is extremely important in a profession like FP&A, right? Like you're responsible for influencing stakeholder management, right? It's not something that AI can come and basically tell someone to make a decision and that's how that works, right? AI can give you the numbers, AI can create those trend analysis, AI can create those patterns and kind of create projections for you, but ultimately being able to step up and take it to the business and influence stakeholders, I think that still needs that human touch. So I will still say, like, yes, there are layoffs happening, but I think there's still plenty of opportunity and I think there's plenty of growth in these spaces that you mentioned.
Especially cloud, I think there is so much AI. A lot of the AI has to come to the cloud, anyways. A
Exactly.
lot of the legacy systems are yet to come to cloud, also. So, the growth is going to outperform
Oh,
like AI layoffs. Maybe. I mean, who nobody knows at this point to a
yeah.
certain extent, but yeah, I would concur with what you're saying.
I do agree. I think this is the space that's growing the most, right? Like this cloud space. And again, to your point, like we're having layoffs because of AI, but what is making AI happen? The cloud space, right? So it's kind of interdependent. So yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Let's do like a penultimate discussion before I move into like a rapid fire, a few
Fun.
questions, just some fun questions. Before that, let's talk about LinkedIn. Why write on LinkedIn, Shraddha?
Yeah, it's something I've always enjoyed writing. Like even ever since I was a child, I've written a bunch of articles for my school, and it's always been a little bit of a passion. Obviously, I came here, everything took a back seat. So, I actually had a career coach. Her name's Pavi. She was the one who actually encouraged me. Like we were having a conversation. I mentioned to her that like, oh, I really want to get back into like writing. And so she was the one who actually pushed me, and she's like, why don't you just write on LinkedIn? Like simple enough platform. Start there first, and then you can figure out how you can pursue a little bit more writing. So I was like, okay, fine. Started doing it, thoroughly enjoyed it, but somewhere down the line, like somewhere in the middle of writing it, like or of pursuing it, I think I also kind of had an imposter syndrome in LinkedIn as well, where I was kind of like, you have so much content. There's so much content on LinkedIn. What is to say that I'm not just duplicating the same content that someone else is sharing? And what is to say that I'm even adding any value, right? Like, what if I'm just another person coming here and just saying the same thing and no one really wants to listen, right? So I've had those emotions as well. But yeah, that the start of the LinkedIn was honestly just a push from my career coach to kind of just take the plunge and see where it goes.
Hey, nice to hear Pavi's name. Definitely a friend, definitely
Yeah.
somebody you have talked to in the past. That's very cool that she pushed you to write. What would be your motivation to continue writing in this space? Like, what? Wait. Before that, sorry, adjusting the question slightly. What are you most interested in writing about?
Honestly, I think just sharing about FP&A, like this space that I'm in. And the reason being is because, whenever I go into a room and we talk about tech, right, the conversations are always around software engineering and product management or project management or whatever, right? All the PM stuff, right? The finance like is the 500th name in the list that actually gets mentioned. And I find it so odd because I'm like, finance is such an important part of the organization, you know? So I personally feel like I'm trying to bring awareness to people that, hey, you know, finance professionals exist and like FP&A, this space within finance. So it's like, okay, even if people talk about finance, they're always talking about like investment banking or like that side or corporate finance. Like no one really talks about this angle, right? So I think it's just trying to bring a little bit more awareness to folks that hey, like this also exists in tech, and kind of have that be like a, you can say it in the same sentence, like you can say tech and you can say FP&A in the same sentence. But I also think like sharing my journey with people, you know, like I personally feel like if I knew of such resources, like when I was looking for a job or when I had just moved to the US, you know, completely alone away from family, I think these are like, this is the kind of like support and like resources that I think could have kind of helped me kind of get by more easily. So I feel like if I'm able to share something and help someone like even 0.01% and someone takes something away from it, even if it's one person, I feel like, you know, I've done something. So yeah.
I think you'll have the early mover advantage if you do that because not a lot of people doing that. It is a great niche to be talking about. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. I'll end the LinkedIn part with one final question. You talked about how people actually reached out to you because of your LinkedIn writing, recruiters. Talk to me about the advantages you've seen of putting yourself out there on a public platform.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing would be like I already mentioned, like you have recruiters, hiring managers reaching out to you, right? So a lot of visibility, a lot of exposure. I think the second thing would be, this is more of personal win, but enhancing my writing skills to some extent. Like I feel like I've gotten back into it, and it's easier for me to get ideas to flow through my brain and translate that into what I want to actually say. Plus, I'm also kind of dabbling in like different kinds of content and like different content modes and tools and stuff. So I think it's kind of cool in that sense because I'm also learning something, you know, outside of my day to day, right? But I also think the other thing is like, because I started like sharing on LinkedIn, I think I've had a lot of folks reach out to me who are looking for roles, right? Who are looking for jobs. And you know, part of it is for referrals, of course, but the other part of it is also for like, hey, can you like, you know, give me a little bit of career advice, or can you share your journey with me and those kind of things, right? So uh, I wouldn't say like I wouldn't even remotely call it like professional career coaching or anything because I'm not I'm not adept at that. But just the fact that I can help provide advice and support someone else's journey in some way or the other, honestly, I feel like that's been my like biggest takeaway, to be honest, from this entire process.
That is awesome. It is rewarding to kind of share what a younger version of you could learn from.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and that's definitely the case because we are always learning from a version ahead of us. You can
Right.
definitely pay it forward by helping other people who are just a couple of steps behind. And it's not even behind in terms of life, but just where they are in the journey so far. What I will say, and something that I want to highlight about writing on LinkedIn, is just the sheer growth in your network. Like me and Shraddha are talking today just because we are
Yeah.
both writing on LinkedIn and we got to know each other. Just a few, like couple of months back, somebody told me, "Hey, I one of my mentees had an interview at Amazon, so I was trying to get him somebody at Amazon to talk to." And I just opened up my first connections to see how many people do I know at Amazon. And there was 60 pages of results of first connections. And I was flabbergasted because these are connections that I had gotten just from the act of writing on the platform. And it is now like a net worth, right? Your network is your net worth kind of a thing. I can reach out to them. Half of them may be inactive on the platform. And then another few will be busy at that point. But I have seen 40 to 50% of the people I reach out to say yes to talking to a mentee of mine. If you or if we ask for time now, just because of having written on the platform, there is trust that we will not waste the other person's time. And
Yep.
they have gotten value from us. So the network is also a big part of why people should write.
Absolutely agree. I think the only one thing I would add, I definitely agree with the opportunities part, Varun. Like I mean, the reason I'm able to sit here and have a conversation with you is because of that, right? So I think it's great. Definitely a lot of opportunity. I think the only one thing I would add to anyone who's planning to do it is like, don't get caught up in the numbers part of it. Like I think that sometimes, and that's not, this is not just a LinkedIn thing. I think this is a social media thing. A lot of the times we get so caught up in like, oh, how many like, followers or whatever do I have, right? Like I think that can start getting a little demotivating if it doesn't grow at the rate that you want it to. But I definitely think like the LinkedIn game is like, it's a long haul game. It's not going to be a, oh, in 5 days you're going to have like 100,000 people following you and that's it, right? So I think the motivation to write on LinkedIn or to showcase your work or whatever it is on LinkedIn needs to be more than just I need followers. I think it needs to be, you really need to believe in like why you're doing what you're doing and then kind of do it, because otherwise you'll get bored after a point, because you're like, your level of followers are not going to increase at that pace, right? Like they increase but they don't, like it takes patience and it takes time to build your brand, right, and build that trust as well. So I think if I had to give advice to like someone on their LinkedIn journey, I would say like early on, like I think that's one thing. And the second thing is like, don't think about the imposter syndrome thing, because I think that's kind of where I kind of spiraled a little bit somewhere in the middle. But I think the most important thing is, why are you doing, like ask yourself why you're doing this, right? And if the purpose of doing this is to reach people, regardless, I think you should just like, you just do it. You just do it anyway, as long as your message is reaching like even one person. It doesn't matter if they get it, if there's 15 other people posting about it. The way your story is like your story, your style is your style, right? You can get inspired, but you can still present content in your own way. So yeah.
That is excellent. I'll share a story here, quick one,
Yeah,
which
please.
is I was obviously focused on following. I was focused on building a brand. I was focused on building a business, which I have. Uh, Early on, I had met somebody who had a seven-figure business doing something very similar to what I do with one third of the following that I have. So one third of the following, seven-figure business. So that showed me that whatever you think about numbers, just throw it out of the park.
Yeah.
There is a lot more to the game than just like, okay, how many followers you have. It is important. I wouldn't sit here and say that it is not a motivating factor. I'm not saying important, it's a motivating factor,
Totally.
but know that you can build a dream life that you want to build, and you are overestimating the number of followers you would need to do that. That's the main takeaway I got from the story. Awesome. All right. Got one quick question that I'll address, which was to me, which is I want to, as a professional in Germany, is it still possible to apply for remote jobs from the US? Shraddha, feel free to add your insight or any experience that you've had. What I will say, Shreya, is that remote jobs from Germany are difficult. They are not impossible. Just know that they are improbable till you are able to kind of bridge two big gaps. One, do you have the expertise that the company needs? Like generally, what happens is people who get jobs here have gone to school here. So a degree gives them the social proof that, okay, they can be bought in as entry level. Then experience in that country is used as social proof to get to the next big company. So how do you close that gap of sharing that you have enough experience? There is no other way, but you have to write about it. Like, especially if you are looking for a remote job, how will you show that you have the right experience? Obviously, it can be great to have be working in a very big company in Germany. Then you can even come to the US using an L1 visa and stuff like that. You don't need to kind of do that. But I know you're specifically asking for a remote job. The last gap that you have to cover is that who are the people who will be willing to work with you when you are in a different time zone? A lot of times it is not the biggest companies out there because they don't need to do this. They will get enough people to work for them where they want to, but it will be maybe the mid-tier companies or really cool startups and entrepreneurs that are building new things that where you can fit in. Those will be the two gaps that you need to cover. If you are able to cover that, then you can land jobs that way. Anything to add, Shraddha? Anything to add? Any advice there?
No, I think you covered it. I'm good.
Awesome. If there is any other question, we probably have just a time to get one question in if anybody has it. If not, I want to kind of dig deep quickly into the rapid fire. I just want people to know you a bit more than the Shraddha who works at AWS and had this journey, right?
Absolutely.
3 to 4 quick questions here, nothing too difficult. First one is what is your favorite movie?
Oh God, really difficult. Uh, I would say, well, I guess because the hype now is like Devil Wears Prada, I'll just say Devil Wears Prada because I can't think of anything else.
Very cool. I have seen that movie actually. I won't be able to quote any dialogues, but I thought it was entertaining. The next one is your favorite cuisine when you go out to eat.
Oh, Italian, hands down. I'm a total pasta person, by the way. I love it.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. Bucket list travel destination.
Japan. Yeah,
Oh, nice. It's
Japan.
getting quite a lot of popularity. Actually, I
Yeah,
was in
I
India
know.
for the
I
last
feel like
six
everyone's going to
months.
Japan right now, and I've only heard wonderful things from folks who have gone and visited. So all the more want to like kind of go.
Absolutely. One final question is if you had to give somebody a challenge based on what we talked about in this conversation, which is they want to go into the tech world from probably a more traditional industry that they were a part of, what is something they can do to kind of start working towards it within 2 hours this weekend? So this is not a big action item, but significant. 2 hours is still significant. What would that challenge be for them?
Identify, make your short list of your like target companies, right? Start there first, and if you within those companies, if you can identify the specific roles you want as well, do that, like create that list. Yeah, and then once because I don't know if that's going to take 2 hours, but if that doesn't take 2 hours, what you can then work on is getting your resume like tech ready. So basically make sure that like you have you're quantifying your impacts if not already there, and then just kind of cleaning up your resume, because I feel like one of the things that working professionals kind of forget is like to update their resume. Like we only remember that when we have to go back and actually apply for a job. So definitely I would say like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being part of the
Of
Beyond Grad Show,
course.
Shraddha. It was great having you and had a great time learning from your experience.
Thank you, Varun. It was wonderful being here. It was wonderful engaging with you, and I loved all of the questions. So yeah, thank you so much.
Where should people reach out if they have more questions for you, Shraddha?
On LinkedIn, just look for me, Shraddha Nayar, on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions. Happy to chat, give advice, whatever it is that I can do to help.
Awesome. Your link to your LinkedIn is in the Luma description. It's also in the YouTube show description. So use that. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody who attended live or is going to watch the recording of this show.